Why do Democrats hate Americans so much? When Hillary was running for president, she said half of Donald Trump's supporters were, quote, a basket of deplorables. Recently, Joe Biden, at a speech in Philadelphia, told America that half of us are semi-fascist terrorists. Under the First Amendment of the Constitution, we have the right to express our opinions, and if we disagree with the left, they don't have the right to take away our freedom of speech. Clearly, the statement by Hillary and Biden are designed to silence the conservatives in America. Many Americans find it easier to go along with the left and give up their right to disagree. What would America look like today if our founding fathers would have given in to the king and not fought for their freedom? Today we must fight to take America back. Join the new generation of patriots who believe in the Constitution. Join the new revolution in America. Fire your shot for freedom by voting on November the 8th. Help all Americans take back our country. It's time for Black and White, a show that wants to bring all of us together, talking again about the issues that concern us. It's time to hear from people who only want to deal with facts. It's time for you to re-engage in your right of American free speech. It's time for Black and White. Welcome to Black and Whites, and today we're being joined by Melissa Ortiz, and she is with the National Center for Public Policy Research. And we're here to talk about the untapped resources in our country for people who can work, and that is people who are somewhat disabled. So welcome to Blacks and Whites.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on to talk about this great topic.
My pleasure. So what interested you to get involved in this?
Well, I myself am a woman with a disability. I was born with spina bifida and hydrocephalus. My original diagnosis was cerebral palsy, and that diagnosis did not change until I was 37 years old. I started school in a wheelchair, had surgery the summer before I started school so that I would eventually be able to walk. And with therapy, I was able to progress to crutches and then unaided walking. And I noticed that people around me seemed to underestimate me. So I've had a real passion from the time that I was small to prove people wrong. I have a friend who gave me a sign who said, go ahead, underestimate me. That'll be fun. And I had to laugh when I saw it because I feel like all people with disabilities, whatever the level of disabilities, are underestimated. There are people sitting on the sidelines of this country who could be wage earning taxpayers, but they are kept out of the labor market because of a misunderstanding about the things that they still offer in spite of, and maybe because of, their disability. And then employers don't always understand that in order to make accommodations, it doesn't have to break the bank. 1 in 4 Americans has some level of disability. And of that 1 in 4, that's 61 million. And of that 61 million people, 75% of them are either underemployed or unemployed. Some of those people have PhDs.
Well, you know, it's interesting listening to what you were talking about, and I was immediately came to my mind that how we in this country, because of the COVID pandemic, we said everybody was disabled and nobody had to work and they got paychecks from the government.
Yeah.
And so, but I learned a long time ago from a very wise psychiatrist who told me that the longer a person goes unemployed, the more difficult it is for them to ever become employed. And so if we are creating a situation where we're providing financial support for these people, we may have in fact taken away their initiative to try and fend for themselves, if you would.
For some people, yes, but not for everybody. Most people that I know who have a disability want to work. They have this desire to be self-sufficient wage earners, and they aren't given the opportunity. So I think that there's that misconception that they don't want to work. I can't speak for people who don't have a disability, who suddenly have gone on the government dole because of COVID, but I know from people like me who are either disabled because of an accident after birth or at some point during their life, or illness, or who are born with a disability, that most of those people want to work and they want to be a part of the working American public who contribute to the maintenance and ongoing flourishing of our society.
Given that there seems to be an incredible, and I really don't know where they all went, but there seems to be an incredible shortage of people who are wanting to work or willing to work. And apparently millions of them disappeared after the pandemic. Now, I know that some died, but that's maybe a little over 1 million. Um, so how does a person who is functionally able to go out into the workplace and do certain things, how do they get exposure to the opportunities that are out there in many, many different industries?
There are many job boards out there for people with disabilities. The first thing I would say is talk to your local vocational rehabilitation office. Yes, they are an arm of the government. They're an arm of the Department of Education in partnership in some instances with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Labor. There are all kinds of ways that you can find out. And I think that we need to do a better job as people with disabilities marketing ourselves. October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and the Department of Labor puts out all this information about how to hire people with disabilities, how to help people, and for people with disabilities, how to help find a job. For me, there was just never any question. I was told that just because I used a wheelchair or crutches did not mean that nothing was expected of me. I was expected to get an education, get a job. It has to start at home. Parents of children with disabilities have to encourage them to live up to their best possible potential. Adults who become disabled have to be encouraged to get into the workforce, and they can do that. They get that encouragement from peer mentors who have been through the same thing. You mentioned before we started the segment that you have a foundation that works with wounded warriors and specifically with head injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder. I have a great friend who does that, and he has a real passion for preventing veteran suicide. And he has said many times that for him, it was key of having mentors and people that had walked that same path. We need to learn to be vulnerable and share our stories. Also, our community needs to get stronger. Our whole community, the American community, needs to say, you know what, if you're able to produce something and offer, if you have something to offer and you're not offering it, we're going to give you X amount of time to get yourself together, and then you need to be out working, doing something. You may, if you become disabled later in life, you may not be able to do the same work that you did before, but you can still offer something. I had a situation where I was in charge of an entire operational division that our payroll guy and our accounting guy worked from home because he was a high functioning quadriplegic. And it made more sense for him to work from home because it was so much energy for him to get dressed and get out, whereas at home he could throw on a t-shirt and shorts and work immediately. So we have to be willing to work. We have to be willing to accept workers who are less than perfect physically or mentally. And we have to embrace the idea that everybody can do something and then create that opportunity. Sometimes it just takes creative thinking, which is something we've learned through the pandemic, is that people can work from home and still be productive.
Well, that's true. I would suggest to you that we've also are beginning to find out that children can't go to school from home unless they're homeschooled. But to try to do it remotely with the television was a bad decision. So
depends on who they've got to support them at home.
True. And a lot of parents gave up their jobs or trying to figure out how they could work it remotely at home. The workforce, and more specifically, the management that hires or potentially hires, is there a lack of awareness in corporate management today, regardless of the size of the company, of the significant opportunity to hire these resources for their company?
I think there's a lack of awareness, whether it's intentional or unintentional. But I also think that with the awareness is this idea that it's going to be really expensive on their bottom line to do. The average workplace accommodation, whatever it is about $500 to get the equipment that somebody may need to come to work. And if you'll find, sometimes if you have a building that may not be accessible, it needs a ramp, sometimes people will donate that. If you go to your Chamber of Commerce and say, I have this problem, do you know anybody that would be willing to donate their time and materials to help me fix it so I could hire this person? Invariably, the answer is yes. Or I don't know, but let me point you in the direction of someone who does know.
Do you think, and I'm not trying to be overly critical of our country, but I'm trying to be realistic too.
Absolutely.
Do you think that there's a lot of people in management who have a significant reluctance to hire something less than perfect?
I do. I do, because if you haven't been exposed to someone with a disability, there are a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misunderstandings. I'll tell you a story. I was hired to teach school, and I was after Labor Day hire. And in the South, that means that the joke is if you're hired after Labor Day, they were digging from the bottom of the barrel. And I was so hurt when other teachers said that to me. And then I realized, oh, wait, okay, so I was a late hire. That's all right. I'm just going to get in there and show them what I could do. I taught freshman English, and within a week of taking my job, the principal called me in and he said, I need to let you know that I've had parent complaints. I said, oh, and he said, yes. He said, they're afraid that you won't be able to control the classroom because you're teaching while sitting or because of whatever. They're just afraid. I said, well, what do you think after a week of being with me? And he said, I think you're doing fine. He said, you won me over after the first 2 days. And he had an open mind, and he let me get in there and prove it. And then he stood firm with me against the parents who were the naysayers. At the end of the year, one of the most vocal naysayers I had wrote a letter. I was in a temporary position, and that was another reason I was a late hire, is they had to create this temporary position because of overcrowding. And my most vocal parent opponent that year wrote a letter begging the school board to keep me at my school where I had started. She said, my daughter was furious with me when she found out what I had done. And so I decided to see if my daughter would be proven right or if I would be proven right. And she said, my daughter was proven right, that this woman had something to offer her and had something to teach her besides English and speech and debate skills.
So how long did you teach?
I taught for 10 years, and I was single that whole time, except for the last half year that I taught. I got married in 2002 and started working. We got married on Saturday, flew to New York on Monday, packed on Sunday, flew to New York on Monday, and I started a new job in a new apartment at a new school in a new city with a new husband, all in one fell swoop. And by January, I was sitting in the floor, practically sucking my thumb, saying, I can't do this. But what I also realized is that I could not be the kind of teacher that I wanted to be and the kind of wife that I wanted to be. So I chose my relationship over my career. I still do some teaching now, some substitute teaching, some speaking, and traveling with homeschool groups.
So if you look at the 61 million people that are currently disabled, and you believe that 75% could be productive, what is the profile of the 75%? Who are they?
They're you and me, with bodies that work differently or brains that work differently.
And is there a particular kind of job that they're more suited to, or does it make any difference?
I think it really depends on the type of disability. I have a friend who is also a wheelchair user because of spina bifida, and she works from home a great deal of the time doing human resource management. It's a lot of paper pushing and transferring and managing of payroll and things like that. And she's really great with IT type things. I think for some people with disabilities, that's a great field. I think medical transcriptionists are in high demand, and that's something that can be done from home or in the office with very few accommodations.
Does we've got just a few seconds left on this.
Okay.
Segment. Does the National Center for Public Policy have material that can help people understand this particular issue?
I'm in the process of putting that together. I was only hired 2 weeks ago. We just launched. And so I'm putting that together for the website. But if people want to reach out to me directly, they can reach me at mortiz, MORTIZ @nationalcenter.org. And I will be happy to send individuals information before we get it up on the website.
We've been speaking to Michelle. Is that right? Michelle?
Melissa,
excuse me.
That's
Melissa
all right.
Ortiz. And we'll be right back after these messages. We are Americans, male and female, from many races and cultures from all over the world. One thing above all else is we are patriots who protect our nation and defend, when necessary, our Constitution from attacks both foreign and domestic. Today, as American patriots, we must take back our country from those who want to destroy it and us. We must start by taking back our children and their education. Parents, not union, should be in charge of our children's education. We must be sure that they are taught about the greatness of America and its people. Our children should not be indoctrinated with the belief that parents are racist and are evil and trying to destroy the world. As patriots, we must take back our country from foreign nations who want to destroy us and our way of life. Yes, as patriots, we want America to be first. We want an open and fair trade policy, energy independence, safe cities, and secure borders where we can grow and prosper as a nation of free people. Become an American patriot. Help take back America by voting Republican in the November 8th election. Welcome back. And we're talking to Ms. Ortiz, or Mrs. Ortiz, whichever is the most appropriate.
Mrs. Ortiz is fine.
Mrs. Ortiz, she works at the National Center for Public Policy Research, and she's a recent hire, and she's working on a program of trying to get employment for persons with disabilities. We've been talking about some of the challenges about being hired. Do people who have disabilities that find work get paid the same as people who don't have disabilities?
Yes, yes, they do. And I would like to just say real quickly too, that Able Americans is an initiative not just for employment of people with disabilities, but to address inequities in healthcare for people with disabilities. And to look, we're doing a deep dive on all the federal and state level programs that support people with disabilities to see where the holes are, where the mismanagement is, and then initiate policies to address those things.
So is this, do the local services facilities provide better help than nationally through the federal government?
It just depends. I'm a big believer in a small federal government. I'm a big believer that the best government is the more localized government, and that I know how to better help somebody in my community than a federal government bureaucrat would know. I have seen from my own experience, my family was lucky enough to be part of a very supportive neighborhood, a very supportive church community. We lost my father to melanoma cancer when I was 5 years old, and people stepped up to help, to make sure that our family had what we needed. I realize that that's the best case scenario. In cases where there isn't community support, I do feel like the state and federal governments have a very significant role, as does the local government, the mayor, the city council, the churches, the neighbors. I know of a situation where a young woman in an predominantly African-American neighborhood in DC, her neighbors, because they knew that her education was important to her, she's a wheelchair user, and every time it snowed, the men of the neighborhood got up before dawn to make sure that her steps were clear, that her wheelchair lift was in working order, and that the sidewalk between her house and the bus stop was clear so that she could get to school. Amazing. And that to me is community taking care of its own.
You know, and that's a wonderful story, but trying to be as objective as I possibly can in speaking with you, is that the exception or the rule?
It's the exception. I'm going to be brutally honest with you and tell you that it is the exception. My story, her story, there are other stories throughout all of America that I could tell you about people with disabilities who are well supported and well loved by their communities. But there are just as many stories, if not more stories, of people who are abused, neglected, disowned by their families, left in institutions. Some of those institutions use electric cattle prods to discipline people that they feel are misbehaving. And it's, you know, and I'm sure if you speak to military veterans who come back and end up homeless, they never thought they would be abandoned by their government that they had in their country that they served and loved. And I have friends who have disabilities who are Americans by birth who feel like their country has abandoned them. And it is time for both sides of the aisle to come together and to bridge the ideological and political gap and reach out to support the most vulnerable Americans among us. And those are our military veterans who are wounded and people with disabilities.
With our foundation, Songs and Stories for Soldiers, we do a lot of work with veterans. And we've done, from the very beginning, about 11 years ago, done a lot of work with homeless veterans. And 5 years ago, I was meeting with the director of the facilities in the Bay Pines district, which is Southwest Florida. And he is in charge of voluntary services. And he brings together all the service organizations to try and get them to help in the hospitals and the clinics. And I was sitting with him and his counterpart in the other district out of Tampa. And I said to him, is there anything you need? And it was strange because they looked at each other and they said shoes. And I was shocked because I knew that they were providing clothes and food and shelter. But he said, we can't provide shoes. I don't know why, never found out why. And, but when a young man or woman or an older man or woman comes into the homeless shelter here in Florida, many times they have either flip-flops or sandals. They don't have the appropriate shoes to go out and interview for a job.
Right.
So we started Shoes and Socks for Veterans program between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I think we probably, in 5 years, we've probably gotten maybe 1,500 pairs of shoes and 3,000, 5,000 pairs of socks. And the reaction to the veterans who get shoes to go out and try and get a job has been amazing, and we really enjoy doing it. But I was thinking about what you were saying, and I wonder what, of all the resources, probably never all, but are there resources out there that many people who are disabled don't know or that are available to them?
We need more resources. There are lots of holes. There are resources, and people with disabilities find out about them. But it feels like it's never enough. And I have to go back to the shoe thing. There's something about having shoes that makes you feel human. And I think one of the reasons why you don't see as many shoes donated is because people think that used shoes are unhygienic or something like that, but you can clean the insides of them and donate them. Also, you can reach out to shoe companies and get them to donate things. It's amazing. If people are made aware of a need, generally speaking, unless they are cold, black-hearted human beings, they want to do something to help.
Right.
Something. And, you know, if they can donate, I have way too many shoes. My husband will laugh when he hears this interview because it's a constant source of joke between us because I have twice as many shoes as he does. And he said, for somebody that doesn't walk, you sure do have an awful lot of shoes.
Right.
I said, yes, because I like to match my outfits.
Absolutely.
And so we joke about it. But the thing is, shoes complete an outfit and they make you feel human. Reaching out to people and making them aware of a need will sometimes, not always, but often create giving. And new shoes are expensive. But I do know that at the end of each season that there are stores all over the country that throw away shoes or send them back to the place that they got them because they can't sell them once the season is over.
Right. Right.
Why not donate them to something like you? And there's also this idea that for people with disabilities, there's a level of shame attached to reaching out for help.
Yeah.
And a fear of being rejected.
Well, absolutely. What we've heard is that veterans are reluctant to go out and look for a job if they don't have, they might have the right clothes, but if they don't have the right shoes, they're very reluctant to go out and look for work. And that affects their unemployment benefits and everything else if they don't go out and look for work. Let's talk about, do you have any data on the disability issue of the 61 million males versus females?
I don't have specific data on that. But I do have some really interesting numbers for you. Let me pull them up here.
Okay.
Let's talk about let's talk about this idea that, if I can get into my email, it is absolutely a physical necessity for us to address this issue of people getting to work, because, and I'm sorry, just I'm having a hard time scrolling and thinking at the same time. So
It's okay. Take your time.
thank you.
Do you have any cooperation with, since we're spending a little time talking about veterans and homeless veterans, do you do any work with any of the veteran service organizations that deal with, I mean, there's a whole organization called Disabled Veterans of America.
Yes. Part of my job, like I said, I was just hired, and part of my job is building that database of organizations and building those relationships. And we absolutely want to work with anybody out there who, if Melissa would learn to do if Melissa would learn to do a word search, we could find things much more quickly instead of scrolling through. There we go. I will be building a partnership with all the disability organizations already in existence. I am going to be talking to anybody that will talk to me about being involved in helping better the lives of people with disabilities, and especially from a private and nonprofit sector. I want the churches involved. I want the synagogues involved. I want the mosques involved. I don't care who you are. If you want to help, I want to talk to you. So let me throw these stats at you. I know we're running out of time, so let me throw these stats out at you. Approximately 61 million adults in the US have some sort of disability. 3/4 of them are on disability payments that can include a monthly stipend like SSI or SSDI, SNAP or food stamps, and Section 8 housing vouchers. The average stipend is $1,236 a month. The average Section 8 is $824. The average SNAP benefit is $240. The conservative estimated total on this is $58.6 billion with a B a month, or $703.7 billion yearly.
Those are governmental expenditures?
Yes. Yes.
Federal only or total?
No, that's federal. That's all federal.
$700+ billion.
Yes. Those are people that could, 3/4 of them at least are people with the right supports who could go to work in our communities and our governments. And I know the federal and state governments have a huge push on hiring people with disabilities, especially veterans with the right skill sets.
So,
and go ahead.
I'm just curious. Do you have any numbers relative to the number of children or children under 18?
I do not. I can separate that out. Children under 18 tend to receive benefits based on their parents' income, not theirs.
Okay. And is that, do you have any numbers as to the number of children under 18 that would be considered disabled?
I do not, but I will get them and post them on our website. These are, again, we're still in the building phase.
Okay. And while we've got the time, what is the website that people can go to learn more information about your program?
Nationalcenter.org, Able Americans.
Nationalcenter.org.
Yes. And then go on there, and it's a project called Able Americans. I think the only thing that's up right now is the press release announcing my hire.
Okay. Well, thank you for spending so much time with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
And helping us raise the awareness of Americans about what needs to be done to help the disabled and look at them as a positive resource for our country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Inflation for most people is causing them to use their credit cards to try and make up for income shortfalls. How big is this problem? In the second quarter of 2022, Americans added $46 billion to their credit card balances. Some of that could be you. The Federal Reserve Consumer Credit Report showed that the rate of interest on credit cards went from 14.56 to 16.65%. Those Americans struggling with credit card debt saw their delinquency rates escalate from 1.66% to 1.81%. The Cambridge Debt debt consolidation program may be able to help you reduce the interest rates by 2/3 and cut your time to pay off the debt from 30 years to as little as 5 years. If you're struggling and you want professional and objective help getting your credit house in order, then call 1-855-435-2066 or go to the website cambridgeyescredit.org/BW-podcast and get your house in order.